It's setting itself up to be quite a significant day in Parliament today as KwaZulu-Natal's Police Commissioner, Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, faces the Ad-Hoc committee this morning. He will outline the serious and controversial allegations he has levelled during a media briefing back in July and what we heard at the Nhlanhla Commission of Inquiry as well. We also know that the National Police Commissioner, Fani Masemola, is scheduled to appear before the committee in the coming days. So let's just get a sense of what to expect and what's really at stake when it comes to this ad hoc committee. Joining us, a familiar face on this matter, retired SAPS Major General Jeremy Vearey. Jeremy, appreciate your time. This is going to be interesting because the last time he tried to raise the alarm in Parliament, it would have been amongst this group of people who didn't take what he had said that seriously. How do you think, what are your expectations of when he appears to begin day one of his oral testimony today?
Yes, good morning to you and the viewers. I think the first thing is to answer that question through looking at a precedent that was set in Parliament in 2015, on the 11th of November, when findings of a similar inquiry into SAPS management and their actions around the recommendations of the Farlam Commission to take action against the Commissioner, where these Board of Commissioners, all provincial commissioners and senior management, went and made a public press statement supporting the Commissioner, thereby preempting or trying to influence the decision of the President at that time. Now, there was a very rigorous process of inquiry, both forensic and others, undertaken by the then Portfolio Committee for Safety and Security. And by rigorous, I mean rigorous in the sense that they appointed serious forensic investigators, unearthed all evidence to make that inquiry meaningful. And, you know, the result of that in its findings was that the statement released by the Board of Commissioners had embarrassed and discredited the SAPS, and that they sort of threatened the President by saying to the President, if you act against the National Commissioner, then you should fire us as well. So later, the findings indicated on that day serious attempts to undermine the executive authority, and it's with particular reference to the executive authority. Now, if the same rigor is followed, if one looks at the results of that commission back then, that inquiry, then the results can be quite career-limiting and threatening, in the sense that back then that commission made a clear finding that all those commissioners contravened their own code of conduct in the SAPS. They prejudiced the relationship between the SAPS and Parliament. Now, that resulted in those commissioners either they had to apologize one by one publicly and confess their wrongfulness. Now, as you can see, that is an entirely different process. It involved a lot more rigor. It involved thorough investigation into everything before that. And I'm expecting, given that standard that has already been set before, that my expectations of what this process will deliver, if it follows the same route, it will dig deeper faster.
Well, they've got to do it, you know, with a bunch of spades, so to speak, or maybe even, you know, some kind of machinery, it would seem, because they've got 30 days in which to compress what we are seeing and what we saw unfolding at the Nhlanhla Commission of Inquiry. And I think you make a really important analogy between that 2015 moment and what we're experiencing now 10 years later, where again, there's some accountability to bear when it comes to the SAPS. We know that Mkhwanazi met with evidence leader advocate Norman Arendse for a final consultation on his testimony, and I believe that happened yesterday, partly to prepare him for a different approach, we understand, than the approach that was taken at the Nhlanhla Commission of Inquiry. What do you think this different approach has got to be? Could it be more prosecutorial, or would it lean more into the politics of what we've seen, or what we've seen and heard at the Nhlanhla Commission of Inquiry?
Okay, if the rigor is followed that was followed with the November 2015 one, then its consequences would be to look at the conduct or alleged misconduct of all parties involved in the SAPS and make recommendations that they either declare that they were wrong, but it will go beyond that. If you look at the previous commission, to look at whether whatever conduct there was embarrassed or discredited the SAPS or acted contrary to its regulations. And if findings are made in that regard, disciplinary steps should be taken against all people involved. And that was what happened in the last inquiry, when that statement was clearly made that people defied their own code of conduct and standing orders and discredited and embarrassed the SAPS. If the same question gets examined now, one would expect the same type of results to follow as before. So the recommendations can lead to steps, disciplinary or otherwise, against members implicated. Doesn't matter whether the general making the allegation, if you are found, if they look at it through the same lens to have brought the organization and embarrassed the organization or violated its own code of conduct or regulations, then Parliament can instruct that further steps can be taken against you. And even demand that you apologize to the whole nation on TV, as was the case back then.
It will depend, though, Jeremy, on the evidence that is presented. We've heard Ian Cameron and others talk about what was heard the first time round, that this was more a narration and a narrative. There wasn't anything to substantiate the claims that were made. This time is bound to be different, and we got a hint of what that corroboration or that corroborating evidence might look like if we consider what we heard at the Nhlanhla Commission of Inquiry. So the thing is, in order for them to reach, as you say, they are equipped, they do have teeth, they can have teeth. Is it enough time, and how much more would they have to be presented with by not only Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, but others like Fani Masemola?
Firstly, judging by the previous commission, you remember they looked into statements between the 1st of August 2015 and another one on the 18th. And by the 11th of November of that same year, 2015, they had their findings ready. So it proves that the machine is able, if it puts the same resources as it did then, to deliver quite fast. So I don't want to break, but I think based on past experience, I'm fairly confident if the same kind of resources and the kind of type of investigative approach gets followed, and it gets peopled correctly in terms of staffing, then I believe they can make it in time. So that's one that is quite important. The other thing is when you face Parliament, it's different from facing a judge. The floor is wide open for you to be inquisitorily interrogated with every single thing you say. So it's a bit more robust, I would say, than sitting in a court. So I understand why there's a separate process of preparation that is required, because you're not dealing with lawyers who are going to ask you a question.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah,
I mean, that's interesting, Jeremy, because then I think what you're saying is it's going to be a lot more of a robust process in the ad hoc committee. And as you say, a lot more inquisitorial. So there's potentially going to be a lot more interrogation. There has been this question about, well, why do we need an ad hoc committee and we need, the Nhlanhla Commission of Inquiry? Just talk to us about, from your perspective, the opportunity to, as you say, go in a more robust route, to be able to ask perhaps more heated questions of Mkhwanazi and others who might give testimony, but as a potential also to fill in any gaps that might have emerged in terms of lines of inquiry from the Nhlanhla Commission of Inquiry. Would that be accurate?
No, the two processes are separate. They look at evidence in terms of their own conventions, in terms of their own practice, and in terms of their own methods. So the evidence, what you say in the one, is not fait accompli going to be adopted as valid and accurate without it being re-questioned in the parliamentary process. So that it's like you're starting all over. That's the first thing. So one of the things is this is where the caution comes in if you're a witness there, or you General Mkhwanazi. You better be consistent ultimately, although it doesn't get taken into account because you're setting a new record. There's facts on or you better be consistent with what you said before, because it might have implications later when it comes to steps being followed. Both processes are under oath, and in both processes you might find yourself tripped over by potentially making a mistake or at worst lying under oath, which is quite a serious thing, or lying to Parliament. So it's an entirely different process with drastic consequences for how you present evidence and how consistent you are and whether or not you're caught out.
Yeah.
And secondly, you are caught out and discredited in this parliamentary process. Be assured that when you face cross-examination, when you're back at the file at the Nhlanhla Commission, that it will come out that certain facts you might have testified to there at the Nhlanhla Commission are now in re-dispute because you contradicted yourself in Parliament.
So he's absolutely got to have his ducks in a row, Jeremy, is what you're telling us. I just want to go and perhaps zoom out a little bit. On that 6th of July morning, when we heard what we heard from Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, we got the sense of a very big picture, a cat's cradle, if you will, of interconnected interests and networks and so on, and allegations made about political interference and encroachment on police work. Based on what we heard in the Nhlanhla Commission of Inquiry, and I know there was a reference to the Big Five, so it is bigger than just the names we are hearing. But do you think we have heard enough from Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi to really set a really big scene in terms of those who, he had said were implicated in the judiciary, people, who were politically tainted, people inside the SAPS themselves who were involved and on the payroll of some of these big alleged players? Did we hear enough about the bigger theme beyond just the Brown Makhotsis and the Cat Matlalas and Senzo Mchunus?
No, back then you didn't hear enough of it because the Big Five, without any clear evidence about who they are and how they link to politicians and who are part of that circle, was not quite fully revealed in the Nhlanhla Commission. However, there's no such possibility now. Now you have to say, if you go there and you testify about the Big Five and people ask you who they are, you have to be, and because they might potentially involve politicians, you must be prepared to name names and give the evidence to support it in the parliamentary inquiry. So that is what the difference is, And remember, this is also a point at which you face both evidence, you give evidence in chief, and you face cross-examination at the same time, or afterwards, which you didn't do possibly in the Nhlanhla Commission. So yeah, the rigor with which you will be questioned when you state things innuendo-wise or in a summative way, or you just refer to broad sweeping categories or like Big Five and you don't want to substantiate what you say. In the parliamentary processes, you can have serious problems if you try to play that same card.
Yeah.
It's going to extract that out of you, and failing which you will be dealt with in terms of its rules.
Jeremy, we're going to have to leave it there, which is so unfortunate for me because I wanted to tease out a few more of those themes in terms of in-camera testimony, encroachment on secrets, classified material. But it sounds, as you say, like two things. He's got to keep his story straight and he's got to reveal a lot more than he did during the Nhlanhla Commission of Inquiry. I look forward to talking more about this with you in future, Jeremy Vearey. Thank you for your time this morning. We appreciate it. It is exactly 7:30 and time for our headlines.